Okay. So, today I'm going to discuss about some important aspects of uh, index configurations in Splunk. So basically, I wanted to discuss about Splunk index life cycle, and if you want to set up the backup of the data before it gets deleted, right? So if you can see my screen, if we go to the default, I mean it's the fresh installation of Splunk. So if you see, there are few pre-configured indexes, right? Like the default one and then the other indexes, which is mainly Splunk uses. So if you see here, there is a maximum size configured for all these indexes. And even if you create your own index, you can define the size limit for that index. So how, like, basically, how the life cycle is going to work for Splunk? I'm sure you know about like the data roles from hot to warm and then from warm to cold. And then at last, when it reaches this limit, like either there are two basic fundamentals basically. So either the data archival will start if the total volume of the index reaches to the its maximum size, right? If you have defined 500 gig, and if the data in that index reaches to that limit, then it would start archiving. So how that works? In that case, it starts archiving the data from the from like it starts truncating from the older dates, right? So if you have data from last year, so it will start truncating from back from the older dates. The newly data will still be there. So that's how it works if it reaches its total allocated size. But even if you want to archive the data before it reaches to its total capacity of the index, so that also you can configure, right? So like when you want to post the data to frozen bucket basically. So frozen is nothing. It's like you want to delete the data after certain amount of time, right? Maybe a month or a year. So how that works? So for example, if you've defined the unlimited size for your index, right? In that case, the index is not going to fill any time, but you still need to configure the archiving. You just want to retain the data of 1 year or few months. So how you can do that? So today we are going to see how to configure frozen bucket configurations to move the data from cold to frozen. Means you want to like deleting it simply. But in some cases, like in production environments, you might need to take the backup of your data before you archive it, right? So, and that you can do it in your local like system itself where Splunk is running, or now you can use the S3 bucket. Like that's going to be cheap in compared to using your server storage, right? So you can configure archiving of your data to your S3 bucket before it gets deleted from the instance. So we'll see how to configure that. And I'll be covering it up in two sessions. So today we'll see to take the backup in the local instance itself before it gets archived, before it gets deleted. And in next session, I'll show you how to take the backup to the S3 bucket before the data gets deleted, right? So, okay, so now let's go to the backend of this Splunk instance. And here I will be setting up a new index. So let's quickly create one new, maybe Splunk X frozen. Okay. Local, local. Okay, fine. So we'll be creating a new index. So I'm sure you know that the indexes configurations goes to indexes.conf. So we'll set up a new indexes.conf here and we'll create a new index. So we can do the modifications here. maybe Splunk underscore test. So we'll define the, so all three need to define. This is going to be our hot, warm bucket, cold bucket, hot bucket. So we'll create this new configuration. So now if you create this index, right, and restart your Splunk, so you could, once the restart gets done, you will be able to see this newly configured. So now there are 15 total indexes configured on this instance, right? Once the restart is done, you will be able to see the newly created index there. So as of now, we haven't configured any archiving rules, right? So it's by default, and we haven't defined any size limits or anything. So it's going to have the unlimited size by default. So the restart is done. Let's go back and check. Okay, perfect. So now you see total 16 indexes, right? Splunk test, it's created. Okay, I think the default is 500 gig. Fine. So it created a new index now, 500 gig. And if you see here, the Frozen path, right? It's not configured yet. So now, like, but the default config, the index is going to act as a default configurations that I explained earlier, right? So once the its total usage reaches to its maximum size, it will start truncating the data from the older dates, right? So that's how it will work, and it will keep the maximum size of 500 gig. But for example, if you want to retain the data only for certain amount of times, so how you can achieve that? And before deleting the data, before moving it to Frozen, how you can configure the backup of that index. So what we will do, and what you can do, you can configure it for all the index in your indexes. You can keep it identical solution for all, but you might have a requirement of to do it only for any specific index, right? So how to achieve that? You basically need to define just two parameters. That's it to configure the backup. So if you see here, this is the one parameter that you need to define. And since we want to do it only for this index, right? So that is the why, that is the reason we are putting this configuration underneath this index, right? If you want to make it generic for all the indexes, you can define this on top of any of the indexes.conf. Like based on its precedence, it will pick that configuration. So, but I want to do it only for this index. And I want to move it in Frozen just after 30 seconds, 300 seconds of moving it to cold bucket. Fine. So, and I want to take, so, okay, so let's do one by one. So now you define this Frozen time period in seconds, right? And you define it just maybe not 300 seconds. Okay, 300 seconds is fine. And you define the path. So before deleting the data, I want to take the backup of that, right? So I'll define the directory and I'll define it in temp folder. That so it takes the backup inside 10 before deleting the data of this index after 300 seconds of moving it to cold. So it with the default configurations, it's not going to move the data to cold bucket unless it reaches to the certain criteria, right? Number of buckets and all in the hot bucket. So to move it manually, what we will do, we'll restart this Splunk. But before that, let's save this configuration, restart the Splunk once. So now once the restart gets done, we should be able to see the frozen path here, right? Because we have defined it as temp now, and that should happen after 5 minutes of once the data gets landed to cold bucket. So we haven't created any data inside this index, right? So we will be doing it next to cross check. So for now, if you go to temp, you don't see any bucket or anything, right? But here we should be able to see the frozen path for our newly created index. So you can see the frozen path as a temp now. Now what we will do, we'll create some sample data using make results. So maybe name, John, location. Yeah. Okay, fine. So we'll push this data to our newly created index. And our index name is, I think, is Splunk underscore test, but let's cross check. Okay, fine. So this is done. Put another record. So we have 2 records now inside 3 records now. Okay, so we have 3 records now. So you can see it, that data is here. But now if you restart your Splunk, right, to roll the data from hot bucket to cold bucket manually, because otherwise it's going to follow the default configurations and that may take time to move it to cold bucket. So to manually move it to cold bucket, we'll just restart the Splunk, and then we will have to wait 5 minutes to see whether the backup has been taken inside temp and then the data has been deleted from the bucket. So in that case, after 5 minutes, if you query this as index, right, you won't see any data here because that would have been archived by then, right? So that's what I wanted to show you today, how to configure the archival of your data, and before deleting it, how to configure the backup. So that, like in today's session, I'm just showing you configuring the backup in the local instance itself. But in my next session, I'll show you like how to take the backup in Amazon S3 bucket, because that's going to be cheap in compared to the local volume on the instance, right? So it has been started. So Splunk has been restarted. So it means the data would have been moved to cold bucket. It would have been rolled there. And as for the configurations, we'll have to wait 5 minutes before the data gets deleted and the backup is taken, right? So, and if you want to check that Splunk lib, this is this default Splunk DB path, right? So if you go here, you'll see the newly created index stories. So this is your DB hot bucket path, right? And now if you see, there is no hot bucket inside this directory. So it means the data has been moved to cold bucket. And after 5 minutes, I think we have defined 5 minutes only, right? Let's go to our indexes.com to see apps. We have created which Splunk, something called Trojan or some app we created, right? So what was that? Okay, index frozen, right? Sorry. And if you go to local, check, just cross-checking the configurations. Yeah, so it's 300 seconds. So which means after 5 minutes, you won't see any data here because it's still in cold bucket, right? So that is the reason you are still able to index it. But after cold bucket, when it moves to frozen, right, after 5 minutes, which means it will get deleted and you won't be able to see any data here. But we have configured the backup also. So it will take the backup before deleting, right? So it will post the backup inside this path, which is temp. Okay, so I think it's 2-3 minutes past. So let's wait for a few more minutes and then let's come back. Okay, so let's check now. Let's go to 10. There's still no backup created. So I think still time to go. Okay, so okay, let me just give an overview of configuring the backup to S3 bucket. So in next session, we'll do the practical of doing it. So the time period that you are going to define, that parameter will remain same, like based on your requirement, how many months data or how many years data you want to retain, you can define that time in seconds. So just make sure that you're defining the time in seconds. And in current session, I'm showing you to take the backup in the local system itself, right? Where Splunk is running. So we are using call to frozen directory. But in next session, we will be using the script, call to frozen script, right? And this can be any of the script like shell script, or you can write your script in Python. So I have written the Python code that will be, so how it will work after reaching to this time, right, which you define here, frozen time period in seconds. Instead of pushing the backup to the directory, which what we are trying to achieve in today's session, it will call out this next parameter, right, which is the script. So what it will do, it will call out this, it will execute this Python script or whatever script you are defining to get the work done, right? So I will be sharing this Python script with you. So it executes this Python script. So we will be defining the S3 bucket name and we'll be doing the bit of the configurations there so that the instance is able to reach the S3 storage, right? And can reach the bucket to post the backup there. So that's the only change we will be seeing in the next session. Instead of using this call to frozen directory, we'll be using the call to frozen script. That's it. The other things will remain same. Okay, so now let's go back to our Splunk. And now if you retest, right, after 5 minutes, you see there is nothing inside this index. And now if you go to your 10, the path which you have defined for backup, you can see that the backup has been created here. So that's how you can configure the backup of your index before the data gets deleted based on your configurations, like the frozen time period in seconds, right? How soon you want to move the data to frozen, right? So that's how you can achieve this. In next session, I'll configure it for S3 bucket and we'll catch up there. Thanks.